A very good morning to Morning Glory, and welcome to Talk, the home of common sense, the one place where the nation comes to talk. Tom Slater's here. Very good morning to you, Tom. This is really annoying, isn't it? So for those people who hate Donald Trump, they're going, waking up this morning, going, he seems to have got a face in the Middle East. Yeah, but he's such a horrible man. Yeah, but he talks about grabbing women by parts of their anatomy that we can't mention, and he's just a horrible man. Well, you know, he's managed to get peace in Gaza, which is actually quite an extraordinary story.
I know, it's a huge story. I mean, the end to this horrendous war that Hamas started, let's not forget, but nevertheless a horrendous war for everyone involved. The fact that the hostages, it seems like if everything stays on track for phase one of this plan, are going to be returned, and the fact that it seems like there is a kind of tentative roadmap towards a longer peace is something that is to be commended. It's really called the bluff of all of the Israelophobes and the anti-Israel protesters who've been running around for years now saying ceasefire now, we get a ceasefire now. And they say, not that one. No,
they're not like this one because it's been orchestrated by Donald Trump, who's obviously a bad man.
Absolutely. And it's going to create some interesting questions, isn't it? Is he going to get his Nobel Peace Prize nomination? I really hope so, just because I think that acceptance speech will be one for the ages. As you say, it's thrown a lot of things into the air, and it's shown up a lot of people in this debate for their own double standards and the fact that they didn't really care about peace. They cared about the destruction of Israel.
Right. And I must admit, I mean, when Donald Trump mentioned it last week, and when there were noises about, can we put Tony Blair, one of the more ridiculous aspects of it, can we put Tony Blair in charge of Gaza? I mean, I'm still kind of quite looking forward to that if it's going to happen. A lot of people think it's a bad idea. But I never thought Hamas would actually agree to sort of defenestrate themselves and basically agree to get rid of the hostages, which is their only kind of bargaining chip, and then move on from there effectively, knowing that they're going to be pretty much taken out of the game because they have no now defence against Israel's forces.
Absolutely, and that is certainly going to be the sticking point at the next phase. At the moment, we really are just talking about the kind of partial withdrawal of Israeli troops to return the hostages. This is going to be a stickier point later on, but it does seem like, particularly their Qatari allies, Hamas's Qatari allies, it's kind of spelled out to them, as did the United States, that if this was the kind of last chance saloon, that otherwise all bets were off in terms of Israel completely eliminating them, and maybe, just maybe, given how degraded they've been, given how many layers of their leadership have been taken out over the course of the past few months and years, that they kind of realised that they just had no more road, at least for now. I'm sure they're still going to try and put roadblocks in place of this deal, but at the same time, things have really changed on the ground.
And certainly watching the celebrations going on in Gaza yesterday, where a lot of people pointed out, they look quite healthy, don't they? They don't look as if they've been involved in a famine. They don't look as if they've been, in any way sort of, subjugated to being treated like worse than the Nazis. The propaganda campaign from many people in this country, I think, is shameful. I think we should point out that those people who said those things that were not true should be literally hung out to dry, and I think we should go after those people. I don't mean that in a physical sense, but I think go after those people in a sort of metaphorical sense and point out how many lies were told during this war and how much propaganda was put out, not least by the United Nations, not least by some of the medical groups that were going in there, and not least by some of the charity groups that were just telling absolute outright lies. I mean, how many times did we hear there was a famine that was going to kill 14,000 people, that babies were all going to die? All of that kind of nonsense. And you just think, you didn't need to do that. I mean, it's a bad enough situation. And, I'm not painting Israel as the good guys here, necessarily, although obviously they're not the bad guys either. But, the levels of hypocrisy and the levels of just untruths that were being peddled by many people, including the BBC, by the way, and Sky, and some other members of the media, were off the scale.
No, and that's something that we're really going to have to reckon with. It does seem like
I think so.
Because Israel has sort of won the war itself, but in terms of the propaganda war, Hamas have put in a hell of a shift, depressingly. I mean, the way in which their death figures have been just mindlessly repeated.
Well, only last night on Question Time, I happened to be watching it last night, Zack Polanski, the world's most useless politician, who used to think that, fondling women's breasts and making sure that they could have their breasts enlarged by his hypnosis is now suddenly, taken seriously. He was spouting, 55,000 people killed, all these Hamas figures, which are not in any way a representative of actually what happened.
No, exactly. And also just people swallowing the kind of video propaganda that was coming out of there. The refusal to recognise that Hamas rules over Gaza with an iron fist. They're in control of a lot of the imagery, a lot of the messaging which is coming from the Gaza Strip. and I think particularly with sections of the younger generation, it's going to take a long time to kind of almost deprogram them a little bit. I think they've been turned against the Jewish state over many years, but it's really been put on steroids by this war, and also primarily, I would say, by people in the mainstream media or with big platforms who should know better, not to mindlessly repeat the propaganda of a jihadist, terrorist, Islamist group, did so anyway, and gave the kind of rubber stamp to all the nonsense that's been pumped
And
out.
the other thing that's interesting from the British perspective is that, and the Mail was really the only paper that's picked this up, the utterly pointless virtue signalling liberals like Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron, both of whom didn't get a mention by Donald Trump, who mentioned almost everybody yesterday when he talked about thanking people in the White House, thanking the cleaners in the White House, thanking his wives, thanking countries like Indonesia and others in the sort of what you might call the developing world for helping to make this thing happen. Didn't mention Canada, didn't mention Britain, didn't mention France, and there's a good reason for that, because he didn't mention any of the countries that so-called recognised Palestine as a state in the midst of all of these negotiations, which could have actually derailed them.
No, absolutely, and this is a point that Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, has made in recent days, which is that it's tempting to see the recognition of a Palestinian state as wrong-headed but ultimately just symbolic, like it won't really change anything on the ground, which is true to a degree. But he made the point that by sending the message to Israel that we even need to make moves towards a ceasefire, otherwise we're going to recognise Palestine, incentivised Hamas to just dig in. They thought if we just continue to not come around the negotiating table, if we just continue to dig into our positions, then it's more likely we're going to get this diplomatic coup of all these various Western countries recognising a Palestinian state and giving us what we want. So it hasn't just made them irrelevant, it wasn't just a virtue signal, they have been spoilers to the peace deal that we now seem to be edging towards.
Let's have a look at some of the clips. Marco Rubio, as you say, praising Trump, but also criticising Europe. Have a look.
Not only is there no other leader in the world that could have put this together, Mr. President, but frankly, I don't know of any American president in the modern era that could have made this possible because of the actions you have taken unrelated to this and because of who you are and what you've done and how you're viewed. And this weekend, because of that, at some point very soon, we are going to see 20 living human beings emerge from the darkness into the light for the first time in 2 years. And that is because not only were you used the credibility and the power and the prestige of this office and the relationships you created, and you committed yourself to making it happen. And I think it will go down as a historic moment in the history of our country and something our country should be very proud of.
I think he's right. I think it's quite a remarkable day, really. I mean, I've been sort of slightly underwhelmed by it all, I guess partly because, you get so mixed up with the news and you get caught up with other stories and all of that. But it's really a massive milestone. I mean, it's an incredible achievement by Donald Trump, this, isn't it?
No, I think so. And it's one of those things where you could say that it took his sort of unique way of approaching these issues to shake things out, and by which I mean the fact that he is kind of willing to go against type, the fact that he can be quite unpredictable, the fact that he was willing to sort of lose his patience with the Israelis while still continuing to be on their side.
Right.
It's just the way in which he does sort of, kind of shake the snow globe, do things a little bit differently. It does sometimes genuinely create space for deals to happen which otherwise wouldn't have happened. I think that's
and I think for an awful lot of people, just to listen to a man like Donald Trump talking in the way that he does, very straight, like a man in the street, I don't think you can overestimate that, in the sense that he doesn't sound like Keir Starmer. He doesn't sound like one of those ridiculous leaders going, we are standing on the forefront of a historical, he doesn't do any of that. Let's have a look at what he actually said about the peace deal.
They're all dancing in the streets. Right now they're dancing in the streets. They're so happy. Everybody's happy. They're dancing in the streets of Arab countries, Muslim countries. I've never seen anything like it. Everybody is happy.
Mr. President, looking ahead, what guarantees Hamas disarms and that Israel doesn't resume bombing?
Well, the first thing we're doing is getting our hostages back, okay? And that's what people wanted more than anything else. They wanted these hostages back that have lived in hell like nobody has ever even dreamt possible. And after that, we'll see. But they've agreed to things, and I think it's going to move along pretty well.
And again, you get these kind of, these nitpicky journalists, and I should probably be on their side, but I'm not often because they're so ridiculous that they're trying to pick holes in it because it's Donald Trump.
Of course, yeah.
But what are you going to do next? Well, never mind. The bloody hostages are coming out. I mean, that is the greatest, result of all, really. That 20 people who are still alive, who have been. I mean, there's one guy who's going to be coming out. We can't forget a couple of weeks ago, digging his own grave. Yeah. And I find it, and it'll be a very emotional moment, won't it, Monday or Tuesday, whenever they all get released.
No, absolutely. You can imagine what the atmosphere is going to be like in Hostage Square in Tel Aviv, and I think you're exactly right. That's the main thing, is the fact that the hostages are coming home. That is a tremendous achievement. Also, they're coming home without Israel even fully withdrawing. I mean, you know, they'll still pull back to, I think, just north of 50% of Gaza's territory. So the extent to which this is clearly a negotiating coup is very obvious. And also, that was always the primary objective. Like so many very complicated peace deals, it's one step at a time. The 20-point plan that was drawn up was sufficiently vague that all sides could kind of buy into it. You could get the first phase over the line, and then you move on and on and on. Of course, we don't know what's going to happen. Of course, Hamas are not honest brokers.
No.
They're jihadist lunatics. But at the same time, this step is something to be celebrated. We hope that the other steps do take place. And the nitpicking, as you say, is more about animus towards Donald Trump than it is lack of faith in this particular plan.
And I mean, you know, I was watching Talk yesterday as the story was unfolding, and you know, the breaking news came in around about, I don't know, sort of 6 o'clock or something like that, that Hamas had actually admitted the war is over. And you kind of go, these are not words you ever expected to hear. You didn't expect Hamas to actually admit that they would stop the war.
Exactly, and it just shows how much things can change when there is sort of serious determination to resolve questions like this. And I think, especially where Hamas are concerned, that will be the big open question, is have they been so degraded? Are they now just a bunch of teenagers with Kalashnikovs and a few over old heads because of the fact that so much of their leadership has been taken out, that there is a bit of space now to imagine a future in Gaza without their presence continuing to be felt? They will continue to hang around, obviously. You're not going to be able to get rid of them completely. Some of them will just melt into the population. Others will claim that they've downed arms and committed to peace, but will continue to subvert things underneath the surface. But the idea of them kind of ruling over Gaza with the iron fist that they have seems like it is coming to an end.
Back here again, as I said, without wishing to put too fine a point on it, there was a rally last night by the Campaign for Anti-Semitism outside of Downing Street. Julie Hartley-Brewer was down there. I saw her down there with Camilla Tominey from the Telegraph as well. And, you know, they were both saying, basically, of course the marching won't stop, because the crazed people who are on the sort of side of Palestine action, the people who want to see, you know, a free Palestine, they don't get it. They don't go, oh, this is brilliant, the war's over, let's now concentrate on winning the peace, or let's now concentrate on sort of setting up a new government which doesn't involve Hamas, which doesn't involve terrorism, which doesn't involve anything horrible, and is actually a democratically elected government. They won't be doing any of that. They'll be marching around at the weekend claiming that Israel is still an illegal occupier of that part of the world.
No, and because this was never really about what Israel was doing in Gaza. The first application for a national demonstration against Israel after October the 7th was made on October the 7th. This was before
they even did anything.
Exactly, like before anything took place, let alone the full-blown ground invasion. You know, the attacks were still going on when the Palestine Solidarity Campaign were calling up the Metropolitan Police and asking if they could march a week hence. I mean, it's just so clear now that this is primarily people who are not interested in peace. They're certainly not interested in a ceasefire. They're interested in the destruction of the state of Israel. And the people who genuinely seem to think that the right response that the Israeli government should have taken to October the 7th, the most deadly assault on Jews since the Holocaust, would be to say, you've got a point, we're just going to pack this whole thing up. It's absurd, but they're going to continue to do it.
They will. And Keir Starmer, of course, is left, you know, standing, holding the baby, effectively, because he had no part in it. He made a statement yesterday when he was in India, and God knows why he was in India. We'll come to that in a minute. We'll play that in a minute as well. But this first from Sean in Gloucester. He said, "Good morning, Mike. Trump has provided, if anyone needed, what a true leader he is all about. What have we got? The snivelling, flip-flopping, useless liar, Keith Starling, that doesn't know what a woman is and imposes a load of rubbish on us that we neither want or need, accuses us of being far-right racist, taxes all of our money, etc. I've generally had enough of this moron." Well, I think a lot of people have, Sean. Let's have a look at what he had to say yesterday about this.
And I will take this opportunity to put on record my thanks to President Trump for his leadership on this, to the Qataris, to Egypt and Turkey, who've done really important work in the negotiations. It is a relief to the world. And I think particularly of the hostages who've been held a very long time and their families, and to all the civilians in Gaza who've been so affected by this conflict.
I mean, it's so ridiculously hypocritical. You know, he recognised Palestine as a state while Hamas was still holding hostages, right? Which did nothing but actually antagonise the Israelis, did nothing but basically create a problem for those people who were negotiating for a peaceful solution, and who really doesn't get it, does he? I mean, he just doesn't understand international diplomacy.
Not in the slightest. And the fact that he even sort of has the gall to welcome this deal when, as we've been talking about...
Nobody cares what he thinks.
No, he's made himself entirely irrelevant.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where, particularly so, because we know why he'd made that announcement. We know why he quote-unquote recognised Palestine, even though it would make no change whatsoever on the ground. It's because of the fact that it was for domestic political reasons. He wanted the left of his party to calm down. He wanted to try and shore up his support in particularly British Muslim communities. This was something that was entirely self-serving. It wasn't about the grand humanitarian gesture he was trying to present it as.
Far from it. And that is really what I think galls, it sort of winds people up even more.
Yeah.
That he's, you know, not only is he ineffectual, not only is he irrelevant, but he's actually insensitive to the needs of the people of this country, including particularly, and I think of them as the Jewish community. You know, he has made an enemy of the Jewish community. He's made enemies all around the world. He's gone off to India for no particular reason, for no particular you know, time that he needs to be there, and while the world sort of goes on around him, he has no part in any of it.
And the betrayal of British Jews, I think, is exactly the right point, Mike, because when he came in, I think he got a fair amount of, you know, credit for the fact that he did seem like he wanted to get on top of the anti-Semitism problem. He did kind of kick out some of the worst offenders. He obviously kicked out Jeremy Corbyn. I think we're in a situation where, after the horror of the Corbyn years, a lot of British Jews were giving the Labour Party a fresh look. That's over now.
Yeah,
and the fact that on October the 7th, on the anniversary, over the course of the past week, he didn't give a speech, he wasn't even here.
He didn't go to any vigil, right?
Says everything.
We said this the other day. He didn't even bother to light a candle in Downing Street, which would have been really easy to do. He could have just stood in Downing Street and gone, look, I'm not going to go out in a grandstand, it's too solemn of an occasion for that, but here I am, my wife's Jewish, my family are Jewish. He said, did he not, when Donald Trump was here, he's got extended family in Israel. You know, surely to Christ, he could have just lit a candle in Downing Street and gone, this is for all of you people waiting for your loved ones to come home. But he didn't do it because he has no humanity.
And
he has nothing. And he's literally like a husk.
And he just can't see it. And I think there's, and maybe part of the calculation, he knows that that wouldn't buy him any credit. Maybe he knows that it's too far gone.
Well, because he knows as well that the scumbags who purport to be, you know, neutral, but who are on the Muslim side of the argument, are not at all neutral, and therefore he would upset them if he lit a candle for the dead and for the people who are being held hostage. And that tells you everything about why Israel was right all along, and the people who support Palestine are completely and utterly wrong.
No, and I think that's exactly. We're at a point now where people just putting up ribbons for the hostages, no Israeli flag, even no kind of, you know, statement about politics, are finding those ripped down. You know, we've seen this since October the 7th, people purely putting up posters with the faces of the kidnapped on there, including babies and very young children, finding them defaced and pulled down. This is what we're dealing with here. This isn't just a concern about the people of Gaza. This isn't just disagreement with the policies of the State of Israel. This is a really entrenched anti-Semitism, which the Labour Party seems to be running scared of rather than trying to confront.
Yeah, exactly right. Tom, good to see you. Tom Slater's here, of course. We've got lots more to do. We'll tell you coming up next whether Keir Starmer actually sounds less robotic or more robotic when he speaks a foreign language. What do you think? This is Talk. Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 28 minutes past 6. Got a couple of messages coming in. This from Damon in Wigan. He says, thank you to President Trump for the end of the war, and I hope the world will start to calm down and talk to each other. Cheers, Mike. Well, you know, sometimes it's interesting, isn't it, that occasionally, Tom Slater's here with me, occasionally you'll get something like this happening, and it has a sort of calming effect, perhaps, on not only just the war in the Middle East, but also maybe on the way that we all kind of deal with things in this country, because in the last few weeks, I mean, this country's been going insane, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, people putting flags up all over the place, people shouting at each other. I mean, I'm getting pretty tired of seeing on Twitter and on sort of, you know, social media, people just shouting and rowing with each other all the time. You know, it's reached this kind of fever pitch, and I wonder whether, you know, because of that, President Trump has gone, you know, we can actually find a peaceful solution to almost anything. If you can cause peace to break out between Hamas and the IDF and Israel, maybe you can do it everywhere.
No, exactly. Surely, you know, between the people who are warring with each other in this country, surely that's an easier
No, because it does
gap to bridge.
It feels like we're at war, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like we're at war with the woke It feels like we're at war with the police. It feels like we're at war with the kind of, the officials of this country and constantly telling us to behave ourselves, you know. And it would be nice if it could all be sort of dialed down a bit.
No, exactly. Oh, and I think this is a reminder, as you say, that even though things can seem intractable, things can change.
Yeah.
You can move the dial. You can, actually solve something which seemed irresolvable even a few months ago. So surely there's some lessons for us in that as much as there is on the geopolitical stage.
A couple more here. Andrew from East Sussex says, Trump has shown the difference between our leaders. He goes out of his way to do the right thing, cares about humanity with the peace deal, and doesn't take any nonsense from anyone, looking after his own people first. Over here, we have a woke people pleaser that recognises terrorist organisations and doesn't really have a view on anything. Maybe he will praise the release of the sausages now. I mean, you never know, do you, with Starmer? But let's have a look at what Starmer did, because he went over to India. Nobody kind of really thought, why is he going to India? I mean, I asked the question earlier in the week. It was like, well, I presume he's going to India because he doesn't like the idea that things are going a bit wrong here. The digital ID story is ratcheting out of control. You have free speech problems. We've got the arguments about the one-in, one-out migrant crisis. You've got the NHS in crisis. Here he is, believe it or not, speaking Hindi. I didn't think I'd ever introduce the Prime Minister of this country speaking Hindi. But the funny thing is he actually sounds worse speaking Hindi than he does speaking English. Check it out.
Mujhe yahan aake bahut khushi hui.
I mean, it's not so much a sentence as a series of 5 words spoken separately, as if they don't actually have any connection to the word before or after.
Yes, it's this odd sort of...
It's like, shut up.
Well, at least it's kind of reassuring that he sounds similarly robotic in whatever language that he's speaking. At least that's obviously just really him rather than just what he's been trained into. He looked very pleased with himself there, didn't he?
He did.
Even though it was like a sort of child who just learnt a nursery rhyme.
In the same way that he looked really pleased with himself in the cockpit of the BA plane. when he said, "This is your captain speaking," he didn't actually say that, but I mean, he might as well have done.
Yeah.
And it was so robotic. He just went, "Oh, God, really, please, just stop. Just stop talking in public."
His Keir Starmer be normal challenge is one that he fails every single day of the week, it feels like.
He really does. One of the things that he did say, though, which he kind of let slip, and I'm quite interested in your view on this, because, if you remember the sort of the dead cat policy of the ID cards and digital ID that came out on the Friday before Labour Party conference to sort of try and swivel everybody away from Morgan McSweeney's problems, swivel everybody away from, what was it called? Donkeygate.
Yes.
Where he apparently seemed to have avoided tax in one way, shape or form. He suddenly let it slip that digital ID was going to be a thing. Have a look at this.
One of the things on digital ID that I do think we need to emphasise and make the case for, frankly, is the great benefits of digital ID. You can see from Estonia the speed with which people can access services that are available to them, which have been transformational, and there's great enthusiasm in Estonia for it. Here in India, I think it's 1 billion people have digital ID. It's been taken up on a voluntary basis in huge numbers, not least because it means that you can access your own money, make payments so much more easily than is available with others. So I think now we need to go out and make that case of the huge benefits that this will bring. There needs to be a national debate about it.
And again, people are asking questions because there's more questions than answers. It's like, is it compulsory? Nobody seems to know. Every time you ask a different Prime Minister, a different Minister, you get a different answer. Is it going to be made available to everybody? Nobody seems to know. Is it just for people who are coming here from foreign countries? Nobody seems to know the answer to that. There are so many questions about it, and people are now worried because he's made noises about how it's going to affect your bank account, how it's going to be something you can use to pay your taxes, how it might be used for, tracking. There's so many questions about it.
No, exactly, and he's got a lot of nerve talking about we need a national debate about this. There was no debate about this. There was Tony Blair, going on about it for years. It wasn't in the Labour Party manifesto at the last election. This wasn't something that they were rolling the pitch for and making the case for. They just turned around and said, we're going to do it, we're going to impose it, it's going to probably be mandatory for work, presumably, if you want to use this as a way to crack down on illegal migration. But now,
except then they say, well, it might be voluntary.
No, exactly.
Well, what is it then?
Which one is it? It doesn't make any sense. And I think it's probably a reminder that this is something that obviously big sections of the Labour Party want to do for a long time anyway. But I think this policy was also a reminder that they are just kind of out of ideas.
Yes.
They're kind of desperately looking for something that will either distract from their current woes or will give them kind of some semblance of mission going forward. But you know, as disastrous and for civil liberties and privacy as I think a digital ID would be, you do wonder whether it's going to be able to get over the line just because of how badly thought through it's been as much as anything else.
And also, I mean, the one saving grace for me is that because the government is so useless at this kind of thing, particularly when it comes to tech, they probably won't ever get around to it. You know, they've said it might be rolled out sometime before 2029 or possibly afterwards. I don't think it'll ever come in. And of course, one of the things that also proves me usually right on these things is that there isn't really anybody that can define what it's for, what it will do, and who will actually have access to it. So again, like the NHS app they tried to introduce during COVID, it will probably just fall flat on the floor.
Yeah, and the way in which it seems to be kind of hoofed over to the sort of science and technology department to deal with rather than the Home Office because they don't want to touch it. You just think, right from the off, there's so many warning signs about this, and there's so much confusion about this, and there's so much little detail on the ground. I think it's because so often with ID cards, they were just sort of, they were a kind of solution, you know, they were an answer in search of a solution. It's one of those things where no one could really work out whether it was for migration, whether it was for public services, maybe it's all of the above. It's just quite clearly that they just like the idea of people being more registered, surveilled and controlled. What that will actually benefit us it comes second.
No, it benefits them. It doesn't benefit us, you know, and we're all going to go, actually, no, we're fine. But the other thing that I find amusing is that the day that he announced it, which was on the Friday before Labour Party conference, as I said, to try and create a sort of dead cat distraction from all the other stuff that was going on. 35% of the population actually were quite in favour of having ID cards or some kind of form of a digital ID. Because many young people certainly in London are quite in favour of it. But it turns out that after he announced that he wanted to do it, people were so unsure of his ability to make it work that the approval rating went down to minus 14 points. So he lost all of the 35% and then added an extra 14%. So he actually went down sort of to 49% anti.
It's incredible, isn't it? I mean, we should almost be thankful that the man with the kind of reverse Midas touch is the one trying to push through this very controversial and very suspicious policy. It's anything this man touches just completely goes up in smoke.
It does.
I don't understand. This is why I think the questions about is he going to last, you know, the year, let alone the term, are completely fair. It's how can he go on like this? I mean, it's almost gets to the point where you almost start to feel sorry for him in a strange sort of way. It's like he's, you know, as in that book that was written about him recently, like the sense that he's just the guy at the front of the DLR pretending to be the driver has never been more
I think
real.
That's absolutely brilliant, And I mean, he comes back from India and we get back to sort of normal parliamentary processes, I guess, and we get the Prime Minister's questions next week, and all of the same problems that were here 2 weeks ago, which nobody's really talked about for a while, are still here. He hasn't solved them. Morgan McSweeney still in sort of a bad place over the £740,000 donation that he never declared. You know, still in a bad place about Donkeygate. Still in a bad place about the economy, which is really horrendous. You know, and we're looking at an £84 billion black hole now.
The Chinese spying scandal.
The Chinese spying scandal, which a lot of people actually say is even the biggest scandal of this government, and there's been loads. But this one, again, they all say it again, reading stories this morning, this is the one thing that might bring him down.
No, especially because you had the CPS this week openly accusing the government of effectively kind of collapsing the trial because of how they were slow walking the information.
And he's the guy who talks about how when I ran the CPS, it was absolutely the best run thing ever, you know, and now they're calling him a liar effectively.
And I just, it's one of those things where if there weren't so many other things going on in the world, this would be a much bigger story. And also if it wasn't the sort of story that takes a little while to explain, you know, it's more than a kind of one-liner to get over what a scandal this potentially is. It's and also they've got nothing else to point to. All governments are hit by scandals of one type or another. You don't have to be cynical to recognise that. There's a lot of people involved with often, you know, questionable tax arrangements or things that they've done in office that maybe they shouldn't have done. This stuff dogs the Labour Party much more because they have nothing else to point to. They don't have public support. They don't have a vision. They don't have a clear policy agenda. Everything they try to do, they cannot do, either because their backbenchers or the country tell them not to. It's one of those things where these scandals dog them much more than they would otherwise because there is nothing else that you can recognise.
I mean, it must be the only government that's been in a death spiral since they got in. I mean, literally from day one. You know, suddenly Lord Ali was the start, and it's gone downhill from there.
I mean, it took Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives, you know, 14 years in power, a pandemic, all sorts of betrayals along the way for him to become, I think, the second most unpopular Prime Minister ever. Keir Starmer is the most unpopular Prime Minister ever, and he's got there in 18 months. It just says Less than 18 months.
Quite an extraordinary place to be. This from Darryl in Blackburn. He says, "Morning, Mike. You mentioned Starmer leaving the UK for India instead of marking October the 7th at a vigil in the UK, but nobody has noticed the fact that there was a deafening silence from King Charles, a man who marks every Islamic event with a few words." Interesting point. Mike, countries around the world rub their hands together when they see Starmer heading their way. They see a cash cow and know he has gifts. He is a great Prime Minister for everyone else except for us. That's Kevin Shropshire. Interesting moment actually yesterday when I think it was a reporter from one of our rival stations who asked the question, you know, because in India they had big pictures of Keir Starmer up all over the place, and they said, you know, is it a bit weird for you, Sir Keir, to come to a country where you appear to be very popular and people seem to want to, you know, cheer you on and look at huge pictures of you, whereas you go back to Britain where you're one of the most unpopular Prime Ministers that's ever been, and nobody wants to put up a picture of you, let alone cheer you. You know? Yeah,
no, I think that's exactly right. Especially, you know, Keir Starmer is so unpopular, you know, it's become the stuff of football terrorists.
Yeah.
You know, there's that chant which I won't repeat because
they
you can't at this hour.
They were doing it at the darts apparently last night.
It's just
Keir Starmer's like, you can't say it.
We always knew he was going to be useless. We always knew he was going to be like boring. We always knew that he was going to be a not particularly inspiring politician. I'm amazed and quite almost pleasantly surprised that he's become so hated so quickly.
Yeah.
Like people have really seen through him. I thought he was going to be one of those people who people struggle to get animated about.
Sort of vanilla.
Yeah, but it's quite the opposite.
They
really hate him.
People absolutely detest him. We're going to come back with Piers Morgan in a little while, talking to Zack Polanski. He was on Question Time last night, absolutely hopeless. But because it's Friday, and even though we're quite serious this morning because of the peace deal in the Middle East, we're going to keep you entertained with a few gaffes. Here's Ian Collins and Kate Ferguson from Labour Party conference.
Is he doing it just for his party, or is he doing it for the wider country?
It's both. They're doing it for both. So he's going to be doing it to speak to his party base. Sorry, excuse me.
You might well have an earpiece problem there, Kate. Is it back with you?
Shall I?
I think we might have just lost communication with Kate. We'll try and put that right and get back to Kate if we can on that specific question.
Yeah. Never mind. Sometimes things go wrong. What can you do? At 6:41, this is Morning Glory. Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up to 6:44. Brian says this morning, Mike, the pressure is on Starmer and Khan now over the pro-Palestine protests because now the war is over, these protests are purely about anti-Semitism. Therefore, the police should arrest all of them on the basis of being Starmer's favourite word, racist. I think that's absolutely right. Let's get a voice note from Johnny.
Morning, Mike. It's Johnny in the van. Listen, it's a great thing, this peace deal that President Trump seems to have negotiated. I hope it all works out and it all pans out exactly how he wants it to. The only downside I can see to this is that all the pro-Palestinian lefty lunatics now won't have anything to demonstrate about, so they'll probably have to go back to climate change protesting, I imagine. Great show as ever, mate. Take care.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? I mean, all these pro-Palestine lot, presumably they'll have something to complain about. I don't know what it's going to be, but they'll no doubt be out and about this weekend. I'm sure they will. And, of course, once again, you'll have the Home Secretary talking about limiting their ability to do so. And you wonder whether or not the Home Secretary, in the shape of Shabana Mahmood, is going to start protesting about the protests and saying, actually, here's another idea. Why don't we just ban protests altogether? So that you can't protest against migrant hotels. We'll be moving you out of there. You can't protest against the digital ID. You can't protest against anything. You can't even go out and show your flag and wave it around because obviously you're from the far right. It's all going to be fascinating to watch. Let's have a look at Zack Polanski, though. He was on Question Time last night. Tom, I don't know whether you saw it, but he got into a pretty big row with Zia Yusuf, the former head of Reform, who's now head of the Doge Department of Reform. But here he is, first of all, talking to Piers Morgan about whether women can have a penis.
Can a woman have a penis?
Yes. It's going to take them a long time on the National Health Service to get rid of it, but that's another separate problem.
All right. I think we'll leave it on a woman can have a penis. People can
I think you're lacking nuance and complexity about a pretty complicated
Not really. You couldn't have been clearer.
I'm clear, because actually when you want to look at the science...
You were crystal clear. I asked a simple question.
But you're laughing at it, which I think demeans
think it's
trans people.
Absolutely ridiculous.
What have you got against trans people? Why are you punching down? Why are you not saying
nothing against
the real
trans
problem
people?
in this
I've already
country?
told you that I think trans people...
You sound like you have a huge problem with trans people.
No. It sounds to me like you don't understand what a woman is, which I think is a huge problem for someone leading a party in this country.
A woman is a gender.
Sorry?
You said, what's a woman?
No,
a woman is a gender.
Biological
and gender
female.
is complicated.
No.
Gender is a spectrum.
It's not complicated. A woman is a biological
gender a spectrum? Is it that binary?
Do you think people are born male and female?
Not necessarily.
Oh, for God's sake.
I think it's more complicated than that.
It's not more complicated, Zack.
Well, it's not more complicated than that if you're a TV show host who wants to make it binary and ridiculous.
Zack, you're going to have to work
this
this
stuff out,
stuff out,
if you want to have a nuanced conversation that actually reflects science,
you know, when I asked you if you
and
want to be
information...
when I asked you if you want to be Prime Minister, there is not a cat in hell's chance of you ever becoming Prime Minister if you don't know what a woman is. The UK Supreme Court has made it crystal clear.
But that's
what a
not the
woman is.
Supreme Court's job. The Supreme Court's job is to look at legislation
Lay down the law
and
of
then
the
make a
land.
legal ruling.
OK. So you know more than the Supreme Court?
Well, yes, actually, in this case, yes, I do.
He thinks he knows more than the Supreme Court. Let me just point out to you, as I do every single time this bozo appears on the airwaves, he used to spend his time as a hypnotist, claiming that if he said the right words and got you in the right frame of mind as a woman, he could actually make your breast bigger.
This needs to be brought up every time he's on television.
He does.
If you genuinely believe that, of course you believe that women can have penises. Of course you believe any nonsense that Greta Thunberg's going to
Not only does he believe that women can have a penis, but he believes that he can make their breast get bigger by just thinking. I mean, what does he think he can do to their penis?
Well, quite. That could have been another string to his bow.
It's early in the morning. Sorry about this, but you know, these questions have to be asked.
Absolutely.
He was on Question Time last night. Here he is having a go at Zia Yusuf.
This is racism, it's fascism, and we should call it out.
Zia. OK, so what we want to do is support people on the basis of whether they are legally entitled to be in this country. That's nothing to do with race, ethnicity, nor religion. Now, let's talk. You accused me earlier, let alone fascist, you said that I was peddling disinformation. And I think people watching this programme at home, given the Green Party are right now, to be fair, they're surging in the polls, it's important that people know this. When Zack Polanski is making seductive claims to you, it's important that you understand, before he came into politics, he literally made money by charging women on the promise that he could literally enlarge the size of their breasts by hypnotising them. That is a true statement.
Later in the show, Zack Polanski, I actually watched it last night, said, we've all made mistakes. Well, I haven't made that mistake. I mean, I don't know about you, Tom. Have you ever been a hypnotist trying to convince women that you can enlarge the size of their breasts by them paying you money?
Incredibly not. I mean, this whole "we were all young once"
It's not
defense.
rocket science, is it? Yeah, you know, listen, I once ran through a field of wheat, you know. I once stole some chewing gum from a shop. I didn't ever try to convince women that I could make their breasts bigger by hypnotising them.
Exactly. It's not really that difficult, is it, to avoid that pitfall of younger
and that
days.
makes him a scumbag, in my view. Sorry. I mean, I'm not going to shrink from that. I just think it makes him a creep, a weirdo, and somebody who is not to be trusted. As simple as that.
Yeah, and I think that's why I think it's so a useful bruise to keep punching, because he clearly hates the fact that this keeps getting brought up. And also it tells you something.
Also, who does he think he is? He also changed his name, by the way, and he claims it was because his family changed their name to avoid being thought of as Jewish, which I get. But nevertheless, Zack Polanski is now his name. It wasn't his name for most of his life up to now.
Yeah, and his politics have been all over the shop. He started out as a Lib Dem, then he was suddenly with Extinction Rebellion, now he's in the Green Party. He used to hate Jeremy Corbyn, now he loves Jeremy Corbyn. This guy's not to be trusted.
No.
The hypnotism thing is just the perfect cherry on the cake as to why in many ways, he's the leader that the Greens deserve, because they've been mental for many years, and now they've got the perfect figure.
And also, when he started banging on about the Middle East, you know, he didn't mention the fact that Mothin Ali, who is one of his deputies, is absolutely rampantly anti-Israeli and anti-Semitic, and is a man who would like to see the destruction of the Israeli state.
And that's another thing which everyone will remember, Mothin Ali being elected and saying that this is for Gaza. He put out a video after October the 7th talking about the essentially the rights of the indigenous people of Palestine to resist. Quite impolitic thing to say, given what October the 7th was. And yet they're still surging in the polls. That's one of the things. I mean, they're not going to become a majority party. They're not going to become a serious.
What they are going to do is damage Labour.
Absolutely.
Right. And because there's enough nutters who now currently support Labour who now think Labour are not left-wing enough. Yeah. So now they're going to go Green.
Yeah, exactly. So it's depressing that even on a small scale, what they're offering is successful. But there is some truth to that.
Exactly right. Let's get a voice note from Matt.
Morning, Mike. Matt in Hove here. I just heard you call it one in, one out again in the intro. Can we please stop calling it one in, one out? Because there's no out. Just because 19 people have went on a flight back to France, they're being replaced. I mean, if you went to Gatwick and jumped on a plane to Paris and then turned back round and got on a plane back to Gatwick, you wouldn't be walking around Gatwick Airport going, bonjour, ça va to everyone, I'm in Paris. You're not. You're in Gatwick. You haven't gone anywhere. You're still in Gatwick. There's no out. It's just in.
It's true. I mean, in a way, it's almost a comedy name, one in, one out. I mean, I continue to keep using it because that's what the government keeps saying. But of course, you've noticed, have you not, that they've stopped telling us when anyone's actually gone out. They don't go, today we managed to deport 3 people to France. They don't say how many people they've done because the number is so small that it's actually embarrassing. So they now don't mention it at all. But I'm reliably informed that I think they've spent the last 3 weeks or something sending something like 20 people back. Meanwhile, about 4,000 people have come the other way. It is a joke. Tom Slater's here with me. We've got more to do. Apparently the NHS is in crisis. Well, it must be. It's autumn, isn't it? October. It's always in crisis. This is Talk. Welcome back to Morning Glory. Goodness me, it's 6:56. We're almost out of the first hour. Tom Slater's here with me. Mike, can you get a message to President Trump? Don't let Starmer anywhere near phase 2, please, says Gary in North Ants. Trump has done a great thing, but the lefty press still go against him. Trump is the peacemaker, says Chris. Let's get a voice note from Phil on IDs.
Good morning, Mike. Phil from Hertfordshire. Just listening to that clip with Starmer and about his digital IDs. He said it will make it easier for people to access their own money. That's a red flag, isn't it? So what is he basically saying, reading between the lines? If you don't have digital ID, you won't be able to access your money. Very, very concerning.
Yes, I think there's certainly concerns about this whole digital ID idea. The idea that you will somehow not be able to get into your bank account, or you won't be able to pay for anything with your credit card or whatever. They can block things. Yeah, it's definitely something we'll be talking about. Front page of the Telegraph, Tom. NHS is in a state of emergency, say doctors, as waiting lists soar. You know, it's almost like Back to the Future, this, isn't it? You kind of going, when did you last see that headline? Under the Tories.
Is it that time of year again?
It is. You know, 24 hours to save the NHS.
Yeah. Exactly. You're starting to see, the kind of annoyingly early Christmas decorations going up in some of the shops. And we're seeing the depressingly early warnings that once again the NHS is in a state of collapse. The fact that this is happening despite that £25 billion injection from the Chancellor, despite the fact that despite the claims that they were going to be laser focused on bringing down waiting lists for a 3rd month in a row, waiting lists have gone up. There's been a rise in 12-hour waits at A&E, 12 hours. God. I mean, the fact that in a kind of civilised nation that, despite the fact the economy is not doing great shape, we should have a lot going for us. The fact that people are having to put up with this and being told that it's actually a great social achievement.
And it's a sort of normality, right? So when you go to an A&E, just be prepared to wait. No! Be prepared to be seen quickly. Yeah. Why should you be prepared to wait?
And I don't know about you, but I really sense that for the first time in quite a long time, people are fed up with being told that this is still the envy of the world, that this is still such a great social achievement.
Load of old cobblers.
People are, it's almost an insult to their own intelligence and what they just experience day to day. Yeah. The fact that they know that when they encounter the health service, they're basically trying to be pushed away from it to manage demand constantly. The fact that everyone now has a horror story from their own family and friends as to how much treatment gets delayed, and the fact that Labour, the one issue that they could always hold on to, usually amongst the public, was that they'd be better looking after the NHS. I think, in just over a year, they've completely shot that
because
reputation.
we care. But it turns out West Streeting made a complete and utter blunder by giving the junior doctors a bucket load of money, 22% pay rise, in the first month that they were in charge. And now look where we are. You've got nurses threatening to go on strike, junior doctors about to go on strike again, ballots all over the place. Yeah, the whole business of health in this country completely useless. Tom, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.